Project, and the third session, which is Far and Bidh Gàidhlig Beò, Where Can Gaelic Live? My name is Iain MacLeod, and I'm going to be your host this evening. I just want to talk about a couple of things before we get into the session. I want to begin by offering a land acknowledgement, and I would invite you to do, as I try to do whenever I hear these words, to really think about what they mean and what it means to be a settler in this land. So I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are, most of us at least, in Mi'kmaq, which is the traditional unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So as I said, tonight's session is Where Can Gaelic Live? My name is Iain MacLeod. And I think before we get started, it would be helpful to set the context a little bit by explaining who I am, where tonight's idea came from, and then we'll get into it. So I am a filmmaker and a screenwriter.
Turning the book around is not going to help.
No.
Sorry about that. I'm a filmmaker and a screenwriter and a Gaelic learner and community member. I live in Dartmouth, but I grew up in New Glasgow. My parents aren't from there, though. My mom is from Western Canada. She has an Ulster Scottish background. And my dad is from Millville in Cape Breton County. So for those of you who don't know, Millville is close to Pointe-a-Coney and Florence and Sydney Mines. It's at the western end of what is now Cape Breton Regional Municipality. And he grew up in a Gaelic speaking environment. All four of his grandparents were first language speakers. And although the language had ceased to be transmitted intergenerationally in the 20s, when my dad was growing up 20 or 30 years later, there was still a lot of Gaelic in the community, particularly in the home. And there were regular church services in both the Presbyterian and United churches in those communities, or in that community. So I've always been very aware of my Gaelic background, and especially because I have a Gaelic name and I've had to spell it all my life for people. I've probably had to do that thousands of times and explain where it comes from. Because of that, I've been very aware of my background, and I started learning the language in the 90s. But that didn't really take, and that sort of ties into some of what we're talking about tonight, because the reason for that was because of a narrative I bought into, and I'm going to expand on that in a moment. But in any case, I started sort of learning again more seriously about 3.5 years ago, and since that time I've been quite involved in the community and learning the language. I've made a couple of films in Gaelic now. And when Francis first asked me if I would be interested in being involved in this narrative project, I didn't hesitate. I said no right away. And no, that's not true. I said yes. And I said yes for two reasons. Number one, as a writer, it's something I'm very interested in, narrative. But also, I think narratives have played sort of a huge role in our language community in Nova Scotia. There was a narrative, for example, I mentioned in the 1920s, the language being lost in my family. My great-grandparents bought into a narrative at the time that said, not only do you need to speak English to get ahead, but if you speak Gaelic as well, that will hold you back. And of course, we now know that is actually not true. The research clearly shows that children raised bilingually do just as well academically, if not better, than their peers. But the thing is that they believed that at the time, and so that shaped their behavior. Similarly, when I was having trouble in the 90s learning the language, I had decided that unless I was going to move to a croft in North Uist, there was nowhere the language could fit in my life. But that's, again, simply just not true. Really, the idea behind tonight is quite simple. We want to show where the Gaelic language can live in Nova Scotia and in the wider world today. And I think it's important to do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're just reflecting reality. Gaelic is used in lots of different contexts, and it always has been. Even in the traditional Cape Breton context, there were, sometimes significant differences between the way the language and culture were practiced in, say, a Protestant community versus a Roman Catholic community. So this is just the way it's always been. The second thing, though, and this is where my not-so-secret agenda comes through, is that in order for a language and a culture to revitalize, the language really needs to exist in multiple contexts. And again, the research backs this up, that if the language only exists in schools or only in homes or only in, sort of almost ceremonial contexts, it's not going to thrive in the way it can if it exists in lots of contexts. So tonight is really about that. Tonight is really about modeling where the language can live, and hopefully inspiring all of you to make it a bigger part of your life. So the first thing we're going to do, that's a bit of the background anyway. I also like to talk with my hands. I don't know if I like to talk with my hands. It's just something I do. So I hope it's okay. So the way this evening is going to be structured is very much like the last couple of weeks. We're going to begin with a breakout session. Then we're going to come back and I'm going to interview some guests who are going to speak about this topic tonight. And then we're going to do another breakout session after that. And then we're going to come back together at the end. So for those of you who were not here in the last couple of weeks, the way the breakout sessions work is basically you are assigned to a breakout room with 2 other people. So there should be 3 people in every room. You don't have to do anything. It just happens automatically. You're taken to that room. And for this first breakout session, they're going to be 15 minutes. And so there should be about 5 minutes for each person. And what you're going to be doing is answering 3 questions, which we're going to put in the chat so you'll be able to see them. And I'm going to read the questions to you now. So the first question is, when you hear the word Gaelic, what words or images come to mind? The second question is, what are some things you've heard other people say about Gaelic? And finally, where do these words and images come from? So I'd really invite you to think about these questions and share your answers with the other people in your room. And again, about 5 minutes each. And after the breakout session, you'll come back and then we'll have an interview / conversation with this week's guests. Sinead. Everybody back, I think. How was that for everybody? I hope that was a productive 15 minutes. And we'll be doing one more of those a bit later in the evening. At the moment, though, it is time for the interview section of this evening. So I would like to introduce the guests first. But before I do, I also just want to sort of clarify one thing around some of the terms we're using in language. So obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but we're talking about the Scottish Gaelic language as it exists in Nova Scotia. And there's a little bit of a difference. The language is sort of universally called Gaelic in Scotland. And in Nova Scotia, when referring to the language in English, we usually say Gaelic. And just to further complicate, or maybe it doesn't complicate it, maybe it makes it better, things, we also have an Irish speaker. And we were talking from the beginning when we were planning these sessions about wanting, even though the focus is kind of on Gaelic speaking Nova Scotia, that obviously we're all connected. And we definitely wanted to make people in Scotland feel included and welcome and involved in these conversations. And additionally, obviously, both modern Irish and modern Scottish Gaelic come out of Middle Irish, and we're the same branch of the Celtic language family. So the idea is that I think anyway that if something is working for some of us, it can be working for all of us, and it's good to keep that conversation going. So I really want to thank our guests tonight so much for being here. I'm going to quickly introduce them, and then we're going to get to some questions. So first of all, joining us is Joyce McDonald, who is from Mabou in Cape Breton and works at the Gaelic College in St. Anne's, where she's the librarian and runs a lot of educational programming. She's also made her first Gaelic language film. She's a very active community member. She's a writer. And tonight, I think the focus we're going to be talking about is a writing group in Gaelic that Joyce runs. So welcome, Joyce. Also joining us from, I believe, Edinburgh and Inverness, respectively, are Donnie Forbes and Callum Ferguson, who are both fluent Gaelic speakers who were educated in Gaelic medium education in Inverness. Donnie is a coach with the Scottish Football Association. We're very excited that they're going to the European Championships this summer. And he has also coached with a number of professional clubs in Scotland, including Hearts, which is one of the 2 big clubs in Edinburgh. Also Callum Ferguson, who's a professional footballer and has played professionally in Scotland, Canada, and New Zealand, and has also represented Canada at youth level. Together, Donnie and Callum have formed a Gaelic language soccer initiative called FC Sonus. So we're going to be hearing a bit about that tonight. And finally, we're joined from New Brunswick this evening by Gráinne Eel, who is a native Irish speaker from Connemara in the west of Ireland. Gráinne is an educator, a yoga and mindfulness instructor. She's a poet and she's worked extensively with children. So we're going to be hearing about some of her Irish language and bilingual English-Irish initiatives. So welcome, I'm so happy you're all here. What we're going to do is I'm going to go around sort of one at a time, and I'm going to ask you a few questions. And the first question I'm going to ask, and I'll start with Joyce, is if you could take us to the moment when you decided to do your project in Gaelic.
I guess the writing group started last year during quarantine. There was an English language writing group that was meeting online, and it normally was meeting in Halifax, but because it was online, I was able to go. And I should say, full disclosure, Iain is the facilitator of that group. And so I went to that group and I wrote something in English, and it was really great. And then I was talking to Iain afterwards, and I said something like, oh, I wish this was happening in Gaelic. I would love to go to something like this in Gaelic. And he said, well, let's start it. And I said, yeah, let's. Okay. And then
and then I walked away. So
yeah, that is what happened. Then he abandoned me. But we just worked out how it would work and invited some people to start coming. And the way that it's been running since June of last year, we meet once a month, and people just have the opportunity to write something in Gaelic. And there's no formatting strictures or anything like that. So we've had people write prose, we've had people write poetry, songs, film scripts, play scripts, and it isn't a big group that meets every month, but we've got a couple of very dedicated people that come all the time, and then other people that have popped in and out. And there's no commitment to it of like, if you're really busy one month and you can't think of any good ideas, you didn't write anything, you just don't come. There's no problem. And if anybody is interested in joining, you can contact me after the session. It's open to anybody. There's no charge or anything. We don't do any kind of feedback on grammar or spelling or anything like that. So whatever you bring, but it's a chance for people to have a deadline to work to, which is a big thing for writers, and just have a chance to read their work, share it with others, have other people read it and give some feedback on it.
Thank you. That's great. And again, I'm sorry that I walked away. I will return. I'm not going to say when though. Donnie and Callum, the same question for you both. Could you take us to the moment when you decided to launch FC Sonus, and particularly the fact that it's in Gaelic, and what that was like, what that decision making was like?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks very much for having us here tonight. It's we really appreciate it, and we're just delighted to see so many people here. So FC Sonus first started in May 2020, in the middle of a global pandemic in Scotland, when there wasn't much going on for young people in terms of activity. So we devised FC Sonus to provide basic activity for young people to do within the confines of their own gardens, within their living rooms, to engage with Gaelic and football at the same time, with a view to growing FC Sonus into an opportunity for children, young people, and anyone, in fact, to engage with Gaelic and football. But funnily enough, FC Sonus, despite starting in May 2020, actually stems back probably the best part of 16, 17 years, and kind of feel it's been in the making for that long, because Callum and myself grew up together. We were best friends through school. We actually met when Callum was in primary 2. I was in primary 1, and we went through school together. We played football together, and we went to Scotland games together, went to Inverness Cali Thistle games together. So we grew up together, but we always felt there was a need for there to be an opportunity for young people to engage with sport and Gaelic at the same time. And for us, the lockdown period came at a perfect time where we felt that there was so many people in isolation struggling to engage with their classmates, with their friends, their relatives. The football was an amazing tool to provide that opportunity to engage so many people on a large scale on our online platforms. So I think we ended up having over 100,000 views on our videos and a really positive engagement. So we've just looked to grow it from there since then. So like I say, though, it's been in the making for the best part of 16, 17 years with Callum and I.
Yeah, I'll just add a wee bit to that as well. And Fesgurma Hula Dunya, it's a pleasure to be here and great to see so many people. And like Donnie said, Donnie was obviously involved in professional football as a coach and myself as a player as well. And I think the whole context of tonight, which is Gaelic's ability to be present and find a place in different ways of life. And for me and Donnie growing up, we had loads of opportunities in music and drama and media opportunities, but there was never anything in terms of football or sports in general. So, and the beauty about sports is the game takes away and kind of adds this fun element to it where you don't realize you're using language. And particularly in Scotland, one of the issues we have here is people feel Gaelic only exists in a classroom setting and it's an educational purpose and they relate it to schoolwork and it struggles to find a way into a social norm. And football has that beautiful ability where you forget that you're even using Gaelic and it becomes a natural part of life. And moving forward, that's the way for the language to go. And the more narratives and the more coexes of life that Gaelic has a place in, the easier the language can recover and move into the future as well. So yeah, no, thanks again for having us here.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for those answers, Grania. So the same question, could you tell me about the moment when you decided to do some of your projects in Irish? I'm not sure if we're hearing.
Grania, you're muted.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Sure, and I just wanted to say thank you for the invite. Gur míle maith agat, Iain agus Gachtanella, and just to have the opportunity to join all of you wonderful people talking about such a lovely topic and an important topic. It's an honor to be here with you this evening. I guess for me it's very, very simple. It's very easy. I come from a Gaeltacht area on the west coast of Ireland, Connemara Gaeltacht, whereby, you know, everybody more or less speaks Gaeilge every day, and it's part of our you go about doing your daily duties, or you're playing, or the children playing at school or outside of school or going to clubs. And so Gaeilge would be the first language. And of course, you know, people are bilingual, and so you can get a mixture of English and Irish together. But I guess once I decided that I wanted to impart mindfulness skills on young people, so coming from a scientific background and then having a practice myself, I realized that straight away, you know, I would be teaching this as Gaelic or in Gaelic, you know, in my communities. So there was no thinking about it much for me. Now, what was surprising though was when I was doing my groundwork and going to various different primary schools in the communities around South Connemara, there had been one or two people into schools maybe the previous year or 2 years before that, imparting mindfulness skills and talking about it, but all through English. So as soon as I heard that, that even gave me a stronger sense of wanting to write a course that I could deliver over 6 weeks through Gaeilge. And so that was the first step, of course, for me. And from there, it was 2017, I think I came over first to Atlantic Canada. And it was during a trip to Mabu where I met Joyce in Cape Breton, the first time that the concept of a summer camp where I felt that I could deliver mindfulness and use it as a way to engage with Gaelic culture, because I'm very interested in the Gael trail. So that's what brought me over in the first place. And to have had the opportunity to go into communities where Gaelic was so vibrant and strong in the not so distant past, and it's still there with a love of the language, I came up with an idea or a concept, and it's a question that we use at home when you're trying to figure out who this child is in front of you, or who this person is that's walked into the room. So we have this phrase where we say, "Oh, Céilesú." Céilesú meaning who do you belong to, or who's your father, or who's your, who's your family. So I just thought that question was a really good turn of phrase that I could use in order to design a course. And my interest lies primarily with younger children, 7 to 12-year-old, that sort of window of opportunity before they get into middle school, maybe, or secondary school, as we call it. So the idea came to me in Cape Breton, and I took it from there. And so I was expanding it when, of course, everything had to stop. So last summer I didn't get a chance to bring it to where I had planned to, but I'm looking forward to the future with it. So let's see where it goes. But over here, it's more or less to do with what you were saying earlier, Iain, about yourself, growing up with a name, with a Gaelic name, and that you spent your life explaining your name to others. So many children that I came across over here, so they would have either a Gaelic name, or they played Irish traditional music or dance, or they had stories from their grandparents of the old country or whatever. So using that as a tool to open up, to introduce a language that they've maybe never spoken before or heard even before. So it's really interesting. Yeah.
I'm just quickly, I'm interested in following up on that idea of some of these programs having happened in English before in Connemara, but not in Irish. And I wonder what was the response of people, either participants or people who'd done those programs in English when they heard you were doing it in Irish.
Well, I don't know about the people who were producing it, I suppose, or offering it through English, but I know that principal teachers and school teachers that I then went into schools with and taught it through Gaeilge were delighted, because it's a new concept, really, this whole adachas. We even had to come up with new phraseologies, new terms of phrase, new words, and actually, because Gaeilge and Gaelic is quite a spiritual sort of language also, to go back and to look at other phrases that we would have used before and to revive them into the coursework that I was imparting. So there was a sense of welcome, big welcome around that, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering, Joyce, maybe you could describe any of the things that have surprised you about the writing group, or even something you might have done a bit differently.
I guess if there was something that I would have done a bit differently, it would be I would have started sooner. Because I think writing is something that's very important in my life, and Gaelic is something that's very important in my life. And of course I want to do the two of them together. And I guess I've been thinking about how I'm not interested in preserving Gaelic. People talk about that sometimes, but that's not what I'm doing. I want to live in Gaelic. I don't want to put it in a jar and stick it in the cold storage room for later. I'm going to put it on some biscuits and give it out to people. So I think, yeah, that's what I would have done differently. If there's anything that surprised me, I don't know, but I guess I did learn that whatever I'm interested in doing, there are other people that are also interested in that, whatever the niche might be.
It is. I just want to point out too, in that previous group you were talking about, that's in English, that you were involved with, you did eventually write a number of scripts in Gaelic in that group. And it's interesting that nobody even bat an eye. It was just, oh, okay, cool. It was a normalized thing. Everybody was okay with it. why wouldn't they be? But it was kind of nice and reaffirming to see that. So I guess I'll ask the same question of Donnie and Callum. Are there things that surprised you about this initiative, and maybe things you might have done differently? Obviously not start in a pandemic would be one thing that would spring to mind, but otherwise.
Oh, you took away my starting joke there, Ian.
Sorry,
That's what I was
took
going to
your
dive
joke.
in with straight away. So, but no, on a serious note, what's been quite surprising, and I think Donnie will back this up as well, is the reception we've had within the Gaelic community has taken me and Donnie both by surprise. We are just two boys that are obsessed with football and have a great passion with Gaelic, and we put our two passions together, and we didn't expect it to go down the path it did. And we're now speaking to various professional clubs about creating partnerships and pathways and holiday camps using Gaelic and making it a part of that. And that's the beauty of football, is Gaelic really struggles in Scotland with this stigma of, oh, it's not cool, it's a dying language, and kids coming through Gaelic medium education, they just disappear off a cliff edge. They stop using it. It doesn't become a part of their day-to-day life, and the language ceases to be of relevance to them. And you hear the same phrase, oh, I'd love to speak the language, but it's just not relevant to me. And the beauty about football is it's the biggest sport in the world. It carries this, everyone wants to play football. Football's cool, football's trendy. And when you put Gaelic with football, you have this beautiful blend where people who otherwise would go, oh, why are you boys bothering with that? Because it's got football involved in it. They go, oh, that's great, brilliant, we'll support you. So that's something that we've definitely found surprising, and there's a lot of exciting stuff going on, even with regards to the Wanderers. A lot of you guys, obviously, in Nova Scotia and Halifax there, with a new professional team with Gaelic on their badge. That's something that we are massive advocates of, and they've done a lot of positive work, and we're hoping to build on some relationships there. But I'm sure Donnie's got a wee bit more to add to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Callum's absolutely right there, and probably the biggest surprise that I've experienced in Callum as well is just the sheer opportunity and the amount of opportunity that we've got, not to just impact the Gaelic language and sort of impact participation in football numbers, but we've also got an opportunity to use football and Gaelic as a catalyst for social change as well within communities, because a big part of what Callum and I believe and the driving force behind FC Sonus is we want to make not just better people, we want to make better communities. And I think through doing that, if we can have social change, that we get people to buy into understanding that we're all trying to push for the same goals and trying to do the same thing, then we're going to make a real success of it. And I think one of the projects we ran at Christmas time was, just to give you an example, was in partnership with the Trussell Trust in Edinburgh, who are a food bank organisation. So we launched an interactive online, what would you call it, Callum? What's the best way to describe it?
A challenge. So essentially, we created an online challenge where you take football socks, you roll them up, you try and do kicky ups with them, and then after you've done that, you've got a Christmas stocking which you fill with donations for your local food bank. It could be a can of beans, some bananas, whatever you can afford to give, and you go and make a donation. And we had schools, Gaelic schools, taking carloads of stuff down to their local food banks, and just exactly what Donnie said there. There's breaking the stigma and the stereotypes towards the language, but community is key to the revival of any language. And without that community and without people coming together, it's difficult for a language to evolve and support each other. And this is the beauty of, I know the last year has been difficult for a lot of people, but the last year, look at what we're doing right now here. This is the Tai Ceilidh. This is community, something that we've lost here in Scotland. The Tai Ceilidh doesn't exist anywhere, and we all think a ceilidh is a dance now, while as a ceilidh means meeting and conversation and storytelling, and it's something that, as I said, we've lost here in Scotland, and it's been better maintained in Nova Scotia than it has here. But this last year showed us the new opportunities that are online, which can bring people together, and me and Donnie are looking to run these projects online to buy into that and to sort of pull different parts of the Gaelic community together using football as a tool to do that.
I just want to actually, I was thinking as you were talking about, the stigma around the language, that when we were in one of our pre-interviews, you were telling me this story. I hope I'm remembering this correctly. But during one of those openings in Scotland where things were a little less locked down, that you were doing some football training in a park, and there were kids who came over and, well, now I'm telling your story, but like that, they were very open to the language. And I wonder if you could just describe that quickly, because I thought it was I was very moved by that.
Yeah, absolutely. So correct me if I'm wrong, if I've got the wrong story, but basically what happened is during lockdown, or during the opening of lockdown in the UK, we put on a holiday camp for young people in Inverness to come and participate and play football. But within football, obviously our goal is that it's got to be immersed in Gaelic, and Gaelic's at the forefront of what we do, and that's our big passion. But within that, we want to make sure that it's not just football and Gaelic, but it's football and Gaelic together. So one of mine and Callum's favorite things to do is come up with games and ideas of how we can actually integrate the two of them without it being separate. So we came up with this game where it's just a normal game of football. It's 7v7 or 4v4, but within the game, we hid this mystery box full of gifts in the vicinity of where we were playing the games. And in order for the players to have an opportunity to find the box, if they did something well within the game, whether that's score a goal or make a good pass or show respect within the game, anything that's positive, they could come over to myself and Callum and ask a question in Gaelic about where the box was. And if they did that, then they'd get a clue, and they could build up clues. But they would also, they would get the opportunity to then go and find the box. So it was all football, but how they could engage with the language as well. I think that's the story you were referring to, and so yeah, that was an excellent way just for the players, rather than them thinking I'm playing football and I'll speak English to my friends. They actively spoke Gaelic because they knew that would be a way they could find or get a clue, ask a clue to find out where the box was. So that's a wee bit of waffle there, but it's an excellent way that we found that's really engaged the players and found it really excellent.
Thank you so much. I hope I also have not misremembered something you said to me, Grania, but when we were talking before, and you kind of mentioned this a little earlier tonight too, is having to come up with words in Irish that were describing things that, hadn't typically been described in Irish, or at least not in a while. And I think I'm remembering this correctly, that some of the kids you were working with got really excited about that, and it became that sort of thing. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure. There's sort of two things that I'm thinking about there about what really surprised me, but that was one of them, most certainly. So there'd be, different phrases that I would be using around, just focusing attention inwards. So it's all about coming into the inner world and the mind and how the mind is flowing. And so dialogue that just wouldn't be used to talking about on a daily basis for a long time. And then talking about sensations in the body and different things like that. So because all of my training and all of my studies were done through English, I had to find a way to express these and bring these words forward. But in describing sensations and feelings, so I was going into different schools and different communities, and even in South Connemara, you will get a strong richness of variance of words describing more or less the same thing, but just depending on where you would go to, the local word could vary hugely to describe the same thing. So it was a way of rediscovering richness of phrase or of a word, and so I would have one word, about, a tingling maybe sensation, dinglishy or whatever, and they would come up, well, oh yeah, that's another, they would come up with another word for it that I wouldn't have heard before, but it would be used in their community. So I found that really exciting, because I thought, okay, I better start taking notes of these, because, there is a richness there scattered around, and this is one way of trying to bring it and collecting them together. So they were really excited about that. And that was surprising to me, that this was a way forward to picking up other words that maybe I might not have been aware of, or that would have been lost at one point, but still living in, you know, in Samael, as they say, Sakant, that they would still be speaking it in that particular pocket or area. The other thing that really surprised me, especially coming over here to Atlantic Canada and introducing Gaeilge or Gaelic to children who would never have spoken a word before, or probably never heard it, was the ease with which within 1 week that they managed to pick up phrases and words. And my aim was to teach a song, you know, Tre Gaeilge, a children's song, and they had it so quickly. Within 4 days, maybe very well. The 5th day, extremely well. So that really blew me away. And so the ease with which children literally had the ear, they were able to pick up on it. And I think bringing in meditation skills and deep listening really helped there as well, interspersed with a lot of playing. We did a lot of games, like the way you're talking, Donnie and Colin, and explaining what you're doing, a lot of invention. So I aim to bring in an awful lot of invention with the interaction with young kids, and they respond so well. So the ease of that really gave me, you know, lifted my heart and surprised me beyond anything. I wasn't expecting it. So you know, they're sponges, they're willing. And it's just, if you know, I've just said this has to be based around designing, building and doing, interacting, body movement, and the key element is fun, and not to be afraid of making mistakes, you know. So the ease of how they were learning really, yeah, that really surprised me.
I think that's a great note too for adult learners of the language, that I think a lot of the times people get so caught up in making mistakes and embarrassment, and you really have to leave that at the door, or it's gonna hold you back. I have one more question to get you all out on, and there's a lot of Tarninik and Jelinek right now going on in Dartmouth, so I'm also like scared I'm gonna lose power at any moment. But I want to ask you each, and I'll start with Joyce. And this is, again, the full on, like, this is the agenda part of where I'm coming from anyway, is I just want to ask you what the most important thing to keep in mind when starting a Gaelic language initiative would be, Joyce.
Well, I was thinking about this question a lot, and I was thinking about...
Don't let them know I gave you the questions beforehand. What are you doing?
Yeah, no, I just came up with this on the spot. What are you talking about? So I was thinking about tradition, and of course, like, there's a lot of beautiful Gaelic traditions, and connecting to those traditions is an important part of what draws me to Gaelic and draws, I think, a lot of people. But also sometimes that can feel a bit limiting. And I saw this thing that was going around last year that said tradition is peer pressure from dead people. And I thought that was funny, but it was also a little unfair to dead people, because I think the pressure often comes from our own idea of what dead people would want us to do. And so that, or sometimes from other people in the community, but, you know.
Will remain unnamed.
Yeah, but no. But there's like more flexibility or more change than maybe we sometimes think in tradition. So an example of like traditional music in Cape Breton, if you go to any dance hall or concert or anything around here, you would see a fiddler, piano player, guitar player, and that's completely what we consider to be traditional music. But, you know, the guitar has only come into the tradition in the past, say, 50 years. And the piano has only been around for the past 100 years. And, you know, using amplification on the music has only been around however long. And if we go back even further, the fiddle has only been a part of the Gaelic tradition since the past 300 years. And before that, it would have been the harp and the bagpipes. And so there's been a ton of changes to what we think of as traditional music over time. But we still see that as you know, connected to the tradition. And I love Gaelic song, Gaelic music, traditional trad stuff, whatever. But I also really enjoy translating English pop songs into Gaelic.
Which we
And,
may be hearing a bit later.
Yeah,
Maybe?
don't give it
Okay.
away.
So would you, not to put words in your mouth, but would you say that flexibility then is a big part of that? About what to keep in mind when doing an initiative?
Yeah, I would say it is, if it's something that's never been done in Gaelic before, is there like a core? So I was going to say about these, like translating pop songs into Gaelic. I've sat around with friends and done it sometimes and just killing ourselves laughing at what we come up with, and you know, sharing song and coming up with spontaneous songs. And I think that's all very much within the Gaelic tradition. So really, what is the core of the tradition that you're getting at? And if you're taking it into a new place, you know, that's okay.
Thank you. Same question to Donnie and Callum. Just quickly, if there was some advice you had to give to somebody starting a Gaelic language initiative, what would it be?
I think for me, it's Joyce has hit the nail on the head there. To be honest, it's the way me and Callum and I approach it is we want to try and make sure that whatever we do is relevant to the needs of who we're trying to engage. So if we're trying to engage with young people and young people want to, if they're interested in sport, then we need to make sure that we're catering for those needs. And like Joyce says, tradition evolves and tradition changes. So we need to make sure that we are constantly moving with the times. And from a football perspective, football's a constantly changing game. It's changing all the time. And we need to make sure we're moving along with that and providing opportunities that are relevant and age appropriate and engaging for our young people. That's certainly the biggest thing for Callum and I.
I would like to jump in there as well and go back to something you said, Ian, about the difficulties people face learning the language. And it's not just learners that face difficulties picking up the language, it's fluent speakers as well, as the opportunities they feel comfortable or used to using the language. And it goes back to similar to what Donnie and Joyce were saying there, which is people learn in different ways. What's relevant to someone else isn't relevant to another person. And with football, there's the opportunity for visual learning. You might kick the ball towards the goal and you go brep and ball, and the kid goes, I have no idea what that means, but he's kicked the ball, so it must mean that. And they put two and two together, while as another person might not pick up on visual learning so well, and maybe they learn well when they write things down. So that goes to Joyce's writing initiative, or similarly with Grania, it could be mindfulness or coming in tune with your feelings that makes you really connect to a language. And the point I'm getting at is there has to be all these different coexes and these different narratives, because everyone's different, and the language has to appeal to every group of people and be relevant to everyone, so that they can learn or use it in these different settings. And that's the beauty of language, is in a time where over the last year, I think a lot of people have really struggled with not interacting with people and mental health and all the rest of it. A language should be a constant in your life. A culture should be a constant in your life, something you can always rely on, something that is always there for you. And these different coexes are vitally important to make sure that everyone's catered for, and there's a place for Gaelic and Gaelica as well for everyone in life moving forward.
Yeah.
Thank you. Last word to you, Grania. If you had to give some advice to somebody starting an initiative in Gaelic or in Irish, what might it be?
I think for me, it would be extremely basic, but I find it that it would be very important, and that is to have a confidence and a belief in what it is that you're trying to bring to a group of people or a group of children, for example, in my case, and Colin and Donnie, or Joyce with a group of maybe writers, but to have full confidence and to feel the ownership of it and not to be afraid to use it in contexts which might not appear to be traditional and not to be put off by it, you know, because we're all going through evolution together. Everything is evolving, and to bring the focus back to the rights of the individual to use the language in a way that is fitting, but most importantly, relevant, and to feel the confidence around that relevance and to own it. So, you know, start off with a strong belief in what it is that you're trying to do. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Grania. Thank you, Joyce and Donnie and Callum. We didn't even talk about Kenny Dalglish, but we're pressed for time. So I just want to thank you all so much. That was a wonderful discussion, and honestly, I could keep talking for hours about this. So we're very grateful to you for being here. We're going to move along now, and the next thing is the second and final breakout session of the evening. So in this session, again, groups of 3, we're going to have roughly 7 minutes each, so about 20 minutes. And I believe the questions are going to be posted in the chat again, and I'll read them. The questions are: what surprised you in what you heard? What themes did you hear? And have you been inspired to participate in or start a Gaelic language initiative yourself? So thank you again to our guests, and we'll see you on the other side of the breakout rooms. Section we call the harvest. And so basically, I'm just going to ask, or we're going to ask, where do these conversations take you? What is your wildest dream for Gaelic as a living language and culture? And I personally believe the sky's the limit. So just go as far as you want. And what action are you inspired to take? So if you just want to take a few minutes and type, and I may read a few of them, and we'll go from there. I will write more in Gaelic. I like that. These aren't binding. Well, maybe they are a little. Someone's inspired to join Joyce's writing group, so that's good to see. Going to sing more Gaelic songs. Going to learn Gaelic again. So you can do roll call in Gaelic each morning in class. I assume it flew by, but that's a really beautiful thought. Wildest dream to choose to speak Gaelic whenever, wherever, innovate the language, speak Gaelic to our neighbors, hear, speak, and feel Gaelic around me daily. Gaelic medium baking group. I really like the sound of that. I would like to be kept in that loop. I need a Thai Kaylee in my life. I think we all do. Interested in Joyce. The uptake on your writing group is quite significant here, Joyce. Brace yourself. To hear and speak Gaelic spoken at the co-op. Gaelic community around Halifax to get together regularly to speak with one another. Maybe that could be at your house, Mike. Finally learn the Gaelic song I've been trying to learn for the last year. Callum and Donnie say that they're looking to actively engage with friends from this side of the water. Some more comments about Gaelic sports and activity. Gaelic in the menus. Somebody living in a house or small community where everyone speaks Gaelic. I think that's a very achievable thing too, and I think if we work towards that, we can definitely do that. Hearing Tim Hortons, hearing Gaelic at Tim Hortons. Soccer camps in Nova Scotia. somebody commenting on the positive energy and optimism in Nova Scotia. It's probably the first time those words have been typed, but it's nice to see them. Many ways we can engage in the language. And I think somebody's speaking here too about something that's very important, which is the balance of honoring the tradition, but also looking forward to the future. First NHL game broadcast in Gaelic. I like that. That has a nice ring to it too. Ping pong in Gaelic next. They mentioned table tennis on Duolingo a lot, so I feel like that may already be in the works. Have as much access to Gaelic as I do to English or French. It's wonderful to see people having the courage and vision to just go for it. I think that's a really important piece too, that, you know, I think these are things we need to do on our own, and that if we wait, I'm not trying to editorialize what people are saying, but I think if we wait, we may keep waiting, and we should just go and do these things. Revive conversation group in Halifax, maybe a singing group. Somebody else mentioned singing Gaelic songs. It's a great way to learn the language. That's very true. Gaelic spell check for iPhones. Bible, reading the Bible next week. Engaging activities where children are supported and encouraged to use of Gaelic with peers. So there are a lot of wonderful comments, and we're so grateful to all of you for those, and we do keep them, and we'll review them. And so thank you. Keep typing. And I believe, I just have to check my agenda. I wanted to say a couple of things before we sort of get away. The next session, so there's not going to be a session next week. It's Good Friday, but the week after that, we're coming back, and Margie Beaton is going to host a section. And I believe Margie is here to maybe talk about that a little bit.
Hello, I am here. Hi, everyone. Wasn't this a wonderful session? My gosh, kudos to your guests and yourself, Ian. Well done. Yes, so we will take a break for Easter next week, and then the following is April 9th, if I'm not mistaken, and our focus will be on the dance, and specifically community dance and social dancing. Part of our tradition here is the square dance tradition. And so we're going to dive into a bit of that and look at what we are missing out on in these COVID times, but also the many benefits and the fun and the stories that surround it, the culture of it. And my guests joining me will be Margie McGuinness, who comes from West Mabu, formerly Juddick. And she had a big part in our tradition over home in Mabu in organizing the dances with her husband Jimmy for years. And so we're going to hear from her, and also Dale Gillis, who comes from Scottsville originally. And he is an avid Ceilidh goer here and loves the music and dance. And we want to hear his perspective. And also Mary Janet McDonald, who is one of our step dance leaders, I would say, a great tradition bearer herself in being a teacher, and a very active member of our dance community here. So we're gonna see what they have to say and see what you have to say, share some stories and some laughs, hopefully. And yes, hopefully you'll join April 9th. That's the next time.
Thank you so much, Margie. I just want to end by thanking, and a huge thank you to our guests, Joyce and Donnie and Callum and Grania, for your time and your wonderful insights tonight. They're very much appreciated, as is the wonderful work of Susan and Natasha for running the Zoom meeting tonight. A huge thank you to Francis McCacken, who organized so much of what we're doing here. I also want to obviously thank How We Thrive and also the Office of Gaelic Affairs. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight and sharing your Friday evenings with us. And hopefully you'll be back in a couple of weeks for Margie's session. So finally, to get us out, I believe Joyce McDonald is going to sing. I'm hoping it's a Duran Duran adaptation, but it may not be. And whatever it is fine. So good night, everybody, and thank you for coming. And here is Joyce.
Yes, it's not Duran Duran, but it's not a traditional song either. Ian asked me if I would do a pop song in Gaelic, and I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a hook. And so unaccompanied in the traditional manner, you'll know the song. Feel free to join in when you get the chorus. Okay. Okay. Ta di the Harapais Midamaras, do a Hajala Gaias Mirafatnahunia, ta di the Harapais Mirik the Mara, Macnamara, ta di the Harapais Mirik the Maras, do a Hajala Gaias Mirafatnahunia, ta di the Harapais Miramacnamara, Macnamara, Akrunya Kek Macnamara, Victoria and Hannah Mahara, Gawavia Vina Saijad, Hookerisha da Haraj. Di the Harapais Miramacnamaras, do a Hajala Gaias Mirafatnahunia. Taught it the Harapais Midamacnamara, Macnamara, 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 how called the Christian Crotara, Macnamara, 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 Amendal, Kuskunda, Miors Gara. Taught it the Harapais Midamacnamaras, do Hajay the Hugais Mirafatnahunia. Taught it the Harapais Midamacnamara, Macnamara. Good
Rhaid Joyce.
Right, Chima.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Happily Vula.
Thank you, Olive.
Happily.
Himirishiv. Himirishiv.
Oh, Himiri still there. Hamish.
Hamish.
Thank you, Walker. Mila Mahagib.